My name is Whitney. I'm 31 years old. 3 weeks ago, I was making grilled cheese sandwiches for my husband when my mother-in-law called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand a word she said. Finally, she got it out. There's been a fire at the warehouse. My husband was inside. They pulled him out unconscious. He's at Mercy General. I almost dropped the spatula. Then I looked across the kitchen island at the man flipping through a magazine. The man who'd just kissed the top of my head 2 minutes ago, and I started laughing. I told her, that can't be right. He's standing right here in our kitchen. I'm staring at him. But she wouldn't stop crying. She kept saying, "Come, Whitney, please come. The doctors need next of kin." So I went. And the moment I walked through those emergency room doors, my legs nearly buckled because of what I saw. Before I tell you the rest, please do me a favor and like this video, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It would mean a lot. Okay, let me start from the beginning. 3 weeks ago, my life was the kind of life people on the outside would call boring, but I called it lucky. I had a husband I'd been married to for 6 years, a small house we'd just finished painting the trim on, and a job at a children's library that I loved more than I should probably admit. My husband ran a contracting business with his older brother. He worked long hours and traveled to job sites a couple of times a month, but when he was home, he was really home. Phone down, eyes on me, the kind of present that doesn't exist much anymore. That Tuesday evening felt no different from any other. He'd been gone 4 days at a project up north and had come home that morning looking exhausted, hugging me at the door for a full minute before he even put his bag down. We'd spent the afternoon catching up on the couch. He took a long shower. I made dinner. He came into the kitchen wearing the gray sweatshirt he always wore when he was tired, and he started flipping through a magazine on the counter while I made grilled cheese, because that's what we eat when neither of us wants to think. Then the phone rang and my mother-in-law was screaming about a fire. I held the phone away from my ear and looked at him. He looked up, raised an eyebrow. "Who is it?" he mouthed. I shook my head, confused, then put the phone on speaker. My mother-in-law's voice filled the kitchen, broken and wet. "He's at Mercy General," she kept saying. "They're stabilizing him. The doctor said, 'Come now.'" He listened with this strange, calm expression. Then he reached for the phone, gentle, and said, "Mom, it's okay, slow down." He said it like he'd done it 100 times. He told her there must be a mix-up at the hospital because he was standing right there, fine, in his own kitchen. He told her to take a breath. He told her he'd call the hospital himself and figure it out. Then he hung up and handed me back the phone. He looked at me carefully. "You should still go," he said. "Maybe go check. She's going to lose her mind otherwise." He kissed my forehead. "Drive safe, baby. Text me when you get there." I remember every detail of that moment. The grilled cheese was still on the stove. The light over the sink was the warm yellow one, not the bright one. He was wearing his wedding band. He smelled like the same drugstore shampoo he always used. Everything about him was him. I grabbed my keys and drove to Mercy General with my hands shaking on the wheel. The whole drive, I kept telling myself this was nothing. Hospitals make mistakes. People in shock misidentify men all the time. My husband was at home. I had literally just kissed him. I would walk into the ER, I would clear up the confusion, and I would be home in time to finish dinner. When I got there, my mother-in-law was already in the waiting area, her hair pulled half out of its clip, her mascara everywhere. She grabbed me and held on so tight I couldn't breathe. "Whitney," she kept saying. "Whitney. Oh God." A doctor came over with a clipboard. He asked if I was the wife. I said yes. Then I said no. Then I said something stupid like, "Look, this is a misunderstanding. My husband is at home. I just left him there." The doctor's face didn't change. He'd seen people like me before. He said gently, "Ma'am, your husband was pulled from a structural fire at a job site outside the city. He has burns on his right arm and shoulder, smoke inhalation, and a head injury from a beam. He's stable, but unconscious. Do you want to see him?" I wanted to scream that he was wrong. I wanted to call my husband on the phone and put him on speaker and show this doctor that I knew where my own husband was, but my mother-in-law was already pulling me toward the doors, and the part of me that wasn't in shock said, "Just go, just look. Just confirm the mistake. We walked down a hallway that smelled like burnt plastic and antiseptic. The doctor pushed open a door. And there on the bed, hooked up to monitors, with bandages wrapped around his right arm and a butterfly clip on his temple, was my husband. His face, his jaw, the scar from when he was 8 and fell off a roof, helping his dad shingle a garage, the little crescent above his right eyebrow. His left hand, the one resting on top of the blanket, was wearing the wedding band I picked out at a jewelry store in Cincinnati 6 years ago. The inside of that band is engraved with our wedding date. I know because I held it in my palm and cried when he proposed. I made a sound I'd never made before. It came up out of my chest like an animal noise. My mother-in-law caught me before I hit the floor. I stood there for a long time staring at him, listening to the slow, steady beep of the monitor. Watching his chest rise and fall under the blanket, his mother whispered, "Oh my boy, oh my baby," and stroked his hair, and I just kept staring at his hand, at that ring, at the date carved inside it that nobody else in the world had any reason to know. After a few minutes, I told them I needed air. I walked out of that room and down the hall and out through the sliding doors into the parking lot. The night air hit me and I bent over with my hands on my knees and tried to breathe. Then I called my husband. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said. Soft. "Warm. You there yet?" I couldn't speak. "Whitney," he said. "What's going on?" "I'm here," I said. "I'm at Mercy General, and he's here. The man they're saying is you. He has your scar. He has your ring." There was a pause. Just a beat too long. Then he laughed, low and gentle. "Baby, I told you. People look alike. Or somebody stole my ID off a site, who knows? Look, I'll come down there if it'll make you feel better, okay?" "No," I heard myself say. "No, stay home. I'll figure it out and come back." He said okay. He said he loved me. He said drive safe. He said the same things he'd said before I left. And the whole time, my hand was shaking so hard against the side of my face I thought I might drop the phone. I went back inside. I sat in that hospital room for another hour. I held the unconscious man's hand and felt the calluses on his palm. The same calluses. He worked with his hands for 15 years, and those calluses don't show up overnight. I touched the scar above his eyebrow. I lifted the edge of the bandage on his right arm and saw the small tattoo he'd gotten at 22 on a dare. A tiny anchor on his bicep. His mother had given me the story of that anchor at our rehearsal dinner. The man at home. He didn't have that anchor. I'd seen his bicep in the shower 2 hours earlier. I'd watched him pull off his sweatshirt to go take that shower. I'd seen smooth skin where the anchor should have been. I sat there with my hand around the unconscious man's wrist, and I felt something inside me go very, very still. I drove home that night, and I did not let myself cry in the car because I needed my eyes clear. I walked into my own house, and the man who looked like my husband was standing at the stove eating the grilled cheese I'd never finished. He turned around, and his face fell into perfect concern. "Oh, baby," he said. "Come here." Was it bad? Was it him? I let him hug me. I let him pull me against his chest. And I made myself nod into his shoulder and say it was someone who looked just like you. A coworker, maybe. Your mom was so upset she got confused. He's stable. He's going to be fine. He squeezed me. "Huh, thank God," he said. "Poor Mom." He smelled like my husband. He sounded like my husband. He used the exact little half laugh my husband used. But when he turned to put the plate in the sink, I watched him roll his right shoulder, and there was no flinch. My husband had hurt that shoulder framing a roof 2 summers ago, and it caught every time he reached up to a cabinet. Every single time. He used to grunt without even noticing. This man reached straight up to the top shelf and put the plate away clean and smooth. I went to bed next to him that night, and I did not sleep. I lay on my side with my back to him, and I stared at the wall, and I felt his arm come over my waist, and I felt his breath on the back of my neck, and I thought I was going to lose my mind. He smelled wrong. I couldn't have told you why. It wasn't cologne, it wasn't soap. It was a smell underneath, the smell of the person, and it wasn't my husband. But here's the thing nobody who hasn't lived inside something like this will understand. Even with the unconscious man in the hospital, even with the missing tattoo, even with the smooth shoulder and the wrong smell, my brain kept trying to talk me out of it. Because the alternative was insane. The alternative was something out of a movie. The alternative meant a man had walked into my home, into my bed, and was pretending to be my husband. And my mind could not hold that. So my mind kept whispering, "You're tired. You're in shock. You saw a stranger in a hospital bed and now you're imagining things. Go to sleep." But I didn't go to sleep. I lay there until the first gray light came through the curtain and I made a decision. I would not tip him off. Whatever this was, I needed to know more before I moved. If I was wrong, I would have insulted a man I loved. If I was right, I was sleeping next to someone dangerous, and if he knew, I wasn't safe. The next morning, I made coffee and packed his lunch and kissed him goodbye like always. He left for the job site. The moment his truck disappeared down the street, I got in my car and drove straight to my sister-in-law's house. My sister-in-law is married to my husband's older brother, the one he runs the business with. She's a nurse practitioner. She's also the person in our family with the steadiest head, the one you call in a crisis. I sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything in a flat voice. The call, the hospital, the ring, the tattoo, the shoulder, the smell. I waited for her to laugh at me. She didn't. She got very quiet. Then she said, "The man in the hospital. Did the burns look fresh? Did he have any other old scars on his body that you could check?" I told her about the anchor tattoo. She closed her eyes for a long second. "Whitney," she said, "I need to show you something." She pulled out her laptop. She told me her husband, my husband's brother, had been worried about something for months. There'd been irregularities in the company books. Money moving in ways nobody could explain. A new partner my husband had started talking about, a guy nobody else had ever met in person, who handled the financial side from out of state. My brother-in-law had hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago just to be safe, just to see who this partner actually was. The investigator had sent a preliminary report 2 days ago. My sister-in-law had been about to call me when her mother-in-law called her instead, screaming about the fire. She turned the laptop toward me. There were photos. The financial partner, the man my brother-in-law had never met in person, was a man I had also never met. Or so I'd thought. The investigator had managed to get a photograph of him from a public records request, an old DMV photo from another state. He had a different name in those records. A different birthday. A different everything. But the face. Underneath the longer hair and the heavier build of 7 or 8 years ago, the face was the face of the man currently living in my house, pretending to be my husband. I sat in my sister-in-law's kitchen and I couldn't make a sound. She kept talking, slowly, carefully. The investigator had dug into this man's background. He'd had a long string of jobs in construction, always under different names, always leaving each one after a couple of years with money that didn't belong to him. He'd had 2 surgical procedures listed in his old medical records from a clinic in another state. Bone restructuring on the jaw. A revision on the brow line. None of it cosmetic on paper. All of it filed as reconstruction after a supposed accident that, when the investigator looked into it, had never actually happened. He had been studying my husband, following him, working his way into the business, becoming him slowly over years, while we lived our normal lives and noticed nothing. The fire at the job site wasn't an accident either. My brother-in-law had already gotten a call that morning from the fire marshal. The point of origin was deliberate. They were treating it as arson. I asked her about the tattoo, the missing anchor. The investigator had a theory about that too. Cosmetic tattoo removal. It's available everywhere now. A few sessions and there's nothing left but skin. I asked her about my husband's ring, the engraved one on the unconscious man's hand. She didn't have an answer for that. Neither of us did. Not yet. I asked her if she told her husband, my brother-in-law. She said yes that morning, the second she'd seen the photo. He was already at the hospital. He was the one who'd ridden in the ambulance. I sat in her kitchen and I cried for a long time, not loud, just leaking. She held my hand and let me. And then I wiped my face and I asked her what we were going to do. We made a plan. I would not go home and confront him. I would not go home and confront him. I would not give him any reason to suspect anything. I would go about my life like a wife whose husband was safely at work. My sister-in-law would coordinate with my brother-in-law and a detective they'd already started talking to. We would let the man think his plan was working. We would let him think the real one was dying in a hospital bed or already dead, while the imposter sat in his house. We needed him to make his next move. The move he must have been planning for years. The move where he'd start signing things, transferring things, moving money, gaining legal control of the business and the house and everything else. The move that would put the evidence of his intent into writing. It took 11 days. 11 days of sleeping in the same bed as a man who was not my husband. 11 days of making him coffee, kissing him goodbye, telling him I loved him, watching his face when he watched me from across the kitchen. There were moments he caught me staring, and I had to smile and say I was just thinking about how lucky I was. I would go into the bathroom and run the shower and bend over the sink with my hand pressed against my mouth so he wouldn't hear me. There were nights his hand drifted across my hip in his sleep and I had to lie there frozen, every cell in my body screaming. I would picture my real husband's face, unconscious, burned, the slow steady beep, and I would tell myself, just one more day. Just one more day, you can do this. You have to do this. I went to the hospital in the mornings when the imposter was at work. I sat with my husband and held his hand. The doctor said his brain activity was good. They said the swelling was going down. They said it was a matter of time. I would lean close to his ear and tell him everything. I told him about the anchor and the shoulder. I told him I knew, baby, I knew. I figured it out. I'm not letting him win. I'd kiss his temple and go home and make dinner. On day 9, the imposter brought home a folder. He sat me down at the dining room table after dinner with that calm, kind expression my husband used to make when he had something serious to talk about. He told me he'd been thinking, with his work being so dangerous, with what happened to his cousin at the warehouse, with how unpredictable life was, he thought we needed to make sure everything was properly set up. Power of attorney, transfer on desk paperwork on the house, a few signatures on the business documents that would let him handle things more efficiently if anything ever happened. He slid the papers across the table. He put a pen in my hand. I looked into his face and I smiled. I said, "That's so smart, baby. Thank you for thinking of me. Let me read these tonight in bed and I'll sign them tomorrow at lunch, okay? I want to do it right." He kissed me. He told me he loved me. He told me he was lucky. I called my sister-in-law from the bathroom an hour later and I told her it was time. The next afternoon, I walked into a conference room at my brother-in-law's lawyer's office. The imposter was already there, sitting next to a notary, smiling at me as I came in. There was a stack of documents on the table. There were 2 empty chairs along the wall behind us, and a detective and a uniformed officer were sitting in those chairs, quiet, hands folded. The imposter had been told they were paralegals. I sat down next to him. I picked up the pen. I let my hand hover over the signature line. Then I set the pen down and I said, "Before I sign anything, I want to ask my husband a question." He turned his head, still smiling, still warm. "Anything, baby?" I said. "What's engraved on the inside of your wedding ring?" His smile didn't move, but his eyes did, just a flicker, just 1/2 second. "Our wedding date," he said, "of course." I nodded slowly. I said, "What date is that?" He said it. He got it right. Of course he got it right. He'd researched everything. I said, "What color was the dress I almost wore before I changed my mind 2 weeks before the wedding?" He blinked. He smiled wider. "Baby, what is this?" he said. "Are you testing me?" I said. "What's the name of the dog we had to put down the year we got married?" He couldn't get it out fast enough. Some name, the wrong name. A name that was nobody's. The detective stood up. The imposter saw the badge on his belt and his whole face changed. I watched it happen in real time. The warm, soft expression my husband wore for me sliding off like a mask, and underneath was someone I had never seen before in my life. Cold, furious, calculating. He stood up so fast, his chair fell backward and he started for the door, and the officer was there, and there was a moment of struggling, and then the click of cuffs. He looked at me as they walked him out, not pleading, just looking, like he was memorizing me, like he wanted me to know that even now, even caught, he wasn't sorry. The only thing he was sorry about was that he hadn't moved faster. I sat at that conference table with my hands flat on the wood, and I did not cry. Not yet. The investigation came out in pieces over the next few months. The man's real name, the string of identities, the 2 other women in 2 other states that he'd done versions of this to before. Not the surgery part. He'd refined his method over years. With one woman, it had been impersonating a fiancé who died abroad. With another, it had been pretending to be a long-lost brother. He'd never gotten as far as he'd gotten with me. With me, he'd had time and access and a brother-in-law's company to siphon from, and he decided to go all the way. He had been studying my husband for almost 4 years. He had taken a job on a crew that worked one site with my husband's company 3 summers ago. That's how it started. He'd made himself useful. He'd worked his way into trust. He'd learned the way my husband walked, the way he laughed, the names of his family, the inside of his marriage from 1,000 small overheard conversations, the surgeries, the tattoo removal. The shoulder he'd had to learn not to favor. All of it methodical over years. He had set the fire himself. He'd lured my husband to that warehouse alone under a pretext about a permit problem. He'd meant for it to kill him. He hadn't counted on the fire crew getting there as fast as they did. The ring on the unconscious man's hand turned out to be the real one. My husband's. The imposter had been wearing a duplicate the whole time, identical down to the engraving. He'd had it made. He planned every detail. The trial took most of a year. He was convicted on counts of arson, attempted murder, identity fraud, criminal impersonation, and a long list of financial crimes. The sentence was long enough that I don't think about it in years. I think about it in the rest of his life. My husband woke up on day 14. I was sitting next to him holding his hand when his eyes opened. He looked at me and tried to smile, and his voice came out as just a croak, but he said my name. He said, "Hey baby," like he'd just gotten home from a trip. I put my forehead down on his chest and I sobbed for an hour. He patted my hair with the hand that wasn't burned. He didn't know yet. He didn't know any of it yet. I would have to tell him, gently, in pieces, over weeks. He would have nightmares about a man wearing his face. He would have to learn that his business had been gutted. He would have to look at me and ask, "Did he touch you?" And I would have to be honest in a way that almost broke us both before it healed us. But that first day, he just held my hand and asked me what I'd been doing while he was gone, like he'd been at a conference. And I laughed. The first laugh I'd had in weeks. A wet, ugly laugh, and I said, "Oh, baby, you have no idea. I want to say something to anyone watching this who has ever felt, in some small whisper inside themselves, that the person sitting across from them is not quite the person they think they are. Trust that whisper. The smell underneath the soap. The shoulder that doesn't flinch. The half-second pause before a familiar question. Your body knows things your mind will spend weeks refusing to believe. It cost me 11 of the worst days of my life to listen to mine. But I listened, and it brought my husband home. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Heartway Stories and let me know in the comments where you are listening from tonight. I read everyone. Stay safe out there, and listen to the whisper. I've thought a lot about those 11 days since it all ended, about what they cost me and what they gave me. People ask me sometimes how I knew. They want a single dramatic moment, a flash of clarity. But the truth is, my body knew long before my mind would let itself believe. The missing anchor on his arm, the shoulder that didn't flinch, the smell underneath the soap that wasn't my husband's smell. My mind kept arguing me out of it because what I was sensing was too monstrous to be real. And that, more than anything else I learned in those weeks, is what I want to pass on. We are taught from the time we're small to be reasonable, to not overreact, to assume the kind explanation. And most of the time, that's a good way to live. But there's a quieter teacher inside each of us, and she speaks in whispers, not arguments. She doesn't have evidence. She has a feeling. And if you spend your whole life talking yourself out of her, one day you'll wake up sleeping next to a stranger and wonder how you got there. I think about cause and effect a lot now. The man who walked into my life didn't appear out of nowhere. He chose, year after year, to become someone capable of what he did. Every small dishonesty he practiced made the next one easier. By the time he was studying my husband on a job site 3 summers ago, he was already so far down that road he probably didn't remember being anyone else. And on the other side of that same law, the steadiness my husband had built over 6 years of being a good man to me is what saved us. Because when I needed to recognize him in a hospital bed, I had 6 years of real things to recognize. A scar earned helping his dad. A tattoo from a stupid dare. A shoulder hurt framing a roof. Real life leaves real evidence. The imposter could copy the surface. He couldn't copy the years. So if you take anything from what I lived through, take this. Be the kind of person whose life leaves real marks on the people who love you, not just an image they could pick out of a lineup. Stay honest in small things, because small things become the spine of who you are. And when that whisper inside you starts talking, even if what she's saying sounds insane, even if you'd have to upend your whole life to listen to her, give her a chair at the table. Hear her out. She is the part of you that has been paying attention while the rest of you was busy being reasonable. It took everything I had to keep my face still for 11 days. I'm not proud of being able to do it. I'm grateful I had to. Because the woman who walked into that conference room with a pen in her hand was steadier and braver than the woman who walked out of her kitchen 3 weeks earlier. The cost was real. So was the gift.